Hello everyone, this is George from Digital Art School, and today we'll be working on the second of our three-part tutorial on how to batch a Photoshop action using 3D elements. So let's jump right in. I'll tell you from the start that you should check the written comments that accompany this tutorial, because I won't be going too much in depth with all the explanation of all the things I'm working on. Now, first things, I will import my OBJ file, the one that I've exporting from 3ds Max. So just 3D new 3D from layer, and I'm also using Photoshop CC, by the way. We notice that our model isn't properly aligned in the scene. It's positioned differently than from how we exported it. So this is a common issue when importing OBJ files in Photoshop. So now I just need to rotate this accordingly. Let's see, 90, yeah, and also I should put it on the ground plane, since I really want the shadows to drop down nicely. So I can either move it, or better yet, go to 3D, move object to ground plane. So this will snap my object instantly. Great. Um, Now that we have our model in place, we should set up our camera angle. Our camera information is currently active right now. We see it here under scene in current view, and we have the possibility to save our view. But before we do so, first we have to pick a more interesting angle. So I think something like this might look just fine. Maybe I will have to exaggerate a bit the perspective to get a more dramatic angle. So in this field, under 3D camera, called field of view, we'll go for something like 35 maybe. Okay, so we notice how the perspective lines are more exaggerated. Something like this looks just fine. So once I'm happy with my view, I just go to view and choose save. I'll name this main view, just in case I'll have a secondary view later on. So now I can easily navigate around my model and instantly switch to my uh, preferred view. Photoshop also says default camera view. So just in case you get lost, you navigated around chaotically, you should know that you can always switch back to this default view, which is somewhere looking at the origin of the scene. Great. So now that I fixed this, I should start texturing my model, and this is because I'm doing this before working on the material properties or the lighting properties of the scene, because I want to see how all these will affect whatever information I have displayed on my 3D magazine model, right? So I don't want a light to bleach out my colors or make text unreadable. So I'll jump in and first place some colors on my model and some text. So we find our material of our model under the model. So this is our model OBJ mesh. This is how I saved it, and here is our material. And we notice that we already have a default diffuse texture. I'll just remove this and create a new texture of larger resolution. So it's always a good idea to work with smaller canvas size and larger resolutions on textures. Um, I'll explain this in the written part of this tutorial more in depth. So now that I've made a new texture, it's now just a blank texture. So we have to go click the thumbnail and edit texture. Great. Now Photoshop CC introduced a new feature, which is this one, UV overlays. You find it under the properties tab. So it instantly overlays my UVs, and these are path based, we could say, although they aren't actual Photoshop paths, but they're not pixels, so they're vectorial in a sense. But if you don't have this feature, you should have access to 3D Create Painting Overlay wireframe. And there you have it, you have your pixels with the wireframe. And this is actually useful if, for instance, in a certain case, you might want to go in and, I don't know, start filling these up, for instance, so you know exactly to what edge you're filling your mesh. Now, so this created a new layer here. I think I'll keep it because I'm interested in the precise pixel value of my UV layout, and I'll also keep this one. And before jumping in and painting this texture, I will place some rulers, so I have better understanding of where I'm drawing. Okay, so here's important to remember how you designed the UV layout in the first place. So for instance, I'm remembering that when I did it in 3ds Max, I kept these sides, this one, and also this one right here, which weren't with actual content, but they just had the information, the color information for the side of the papers. So, and I also didn't model all these papers right here, so I don't have thousands of polygons or hundreds of polygons. I just left one poly, so two triangles, and I'll have to fake that overlapping of pages from my texture. So I'm happy with this. So I will just create some stripes of various colors, and I'll just make sure to include also black and white. This is because um, it makes the most sense, because you'd like to have to preview how things will look over black and over white, because we have to keep in mind that we'll be baking this as an action, and we'll be overriding this texture, in fact, with various other textures that some may be more white driven, some may be more dark driven, and we need to see if for instance this dark is pure dark and this white is pure white, and how saturated this color remains, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I can skip this and this for the moment. So I'll just make a new text layer and just write something here. So, okay, so let me make this black. Okay, good. So even though I don't really have to do this at this stage, I will do it because I'm editing my texture anyway. So now I'm going to simulate those paper stacks going on on this side. So I just make a new layer and fill it black. and get this on dissolve to get a nice starting noise, and just give it a few dots. And let me just group this on. Okay, so now that I have this, I'm merging it and go to filter, motion blur. I'm choosing a vertical blur, obviously. So this looks fine. I think I'll just multiply it to enhance it a bit. Yeah, this looks just fine. Okay, so call this side papers. Now you also notice how all my canvas is actually holding my color information in a not so optimal way, so I don't have these two pages going from left to right. So it was a good idea to make this texture a bit larger. So now I'll do the same for these stripes right here. I'll just well, actually I think I'll just clone this, Control J for cloning, right? And let me see, I'll make a new layer and fill it with white underneath because I want to use Puppet Warp to make this work. Okay, so now I don't have transparent pixels anymore. I have just full pixels, whereas these ones, you see, if I try to select the side pages, Photoshop will tell me that I don't have even 50% selected. So because the Puppet Warp doesn't work well with opacity, non-opaque layers, so edit Puppet Warp. I'm just putting some points here and there. Good. Now I could have done this with free transform and warp, but it would have taken me for certain much more time, and probably not. Puppet Warp is fun to work with, right? So let's just mirror this. Um, so flip horizontal, snap, merging. Okay, just checking this. It doesn't have to be super perfect. Just to be there. Now also I remember here I had my back cover, so I'll just make this black because I'm not sure to which extent this will actually be visible, and if it is visible for just say a pixel line, I'd rather have that pixel line black, so just to act as an outline. So this is my texture. I can leave this on or off. This won't affect the way um, my texture is displayed. So I'm just saving this. This acts like a smart object, so it will load in here automatically. And now you see what I was telling you about. So now we can really appreciate how white is white in the 3D model, and black, and also color, and also the text. And the first thing we notice is that we had our book turned upside down. So right, the text is upside down. So at this point we can either rotate the model or rotate our texture. I think I'll just rotate the model. I'll use the gizmo this time. I'm not, doesn't have to be 180 degrees exactly. I can even go to a more, I think I go something like this might look actually better, downwards perspective. Okay, so I'm happy with this. Now we should work on our lighting scheme. And you should know there are a couple of differences between CC, actually one difference between CC and CS6, and that is Photoshop CC comes with by default 3D scene loads an IBL file. So IBL stands for image-based lighting. So it's practically an image that where it has white pixels it lights, and where it has dark pixels it doesn't. So IBL exists in CS6 obviously, and you should use it, but it just doesn't preload a sample texture. So in the end, I think I liked my scene with only these two type of lightings. So just one IBL lighting, you can't have more, and one light, which won't be an infinite light as it is in this moment. So I could use an infinite light, but I want to use something more interesting than this. So, well, actually, I think I'll just delete my infinite light now. Lights are pretty much the only thing you can delete in this 3D menu, and I'll just click here and edit my environment texture. What I don't like about this is that it has too many spots, so this will generate um, I'm afraid too many reflections on my model. So I'll just fill this with base gray, um, something a bit darker than what they've chosen. Okay, and just to use a brush, I'll use a rectangular brush. I think I have it preloaded. Yeah. So I want just a couple of spots here. Just use some spacing for this. Now I should make it white. Maybe make it a bit smaller. Maybe like this. Okay. And then I just copy this down here and make it something more interesting. And finally, I will blur everything because I don't want harsh reflections on my model. So yeah, this is pretty good. Okay, maybe center it a bit. Okay, great. So you can actually add color here and whatever you want. It depends on the scene actually. So and also this is a texture you don't want to have as pretty large because it will slow down rendering times. Now about rendering, I thought about this and since this is now you see the reflections I was talking about. So you notice how I don't have too many points here, just a few light streaks. Now about rendering, uh, I don't want to render this this 3D scene each time I'm loading a different cover, a different not cover but different texture for my pages, because that would take a lot of time. So in my workflow I'll try to use those techniques that rely on real-time preview, so the kind of preview we're having right now, instead of the preview that would come if we click render and we wait. So the first thing we'll notice is that, for instance, this ambient occlusion that occurs here, so this diffuse shadowing isn't previewing for my environment map. So let me escape this. Even if I wanted to light my scene exclusively with my environment map, that would be impossible. In my case, I could actually increase the intensity and call it a night, but I can't do that because I won't have any shadows. So instead, I'll use a new point light. So I'm just creating a light. I should zoom out. Sorry, I should zoom out so I can position it better. Okay. So I want my shadow to be visible and to hit somewhere in this direction. So I'm watching like this and have the this is actually a great angle I've got. Let me check my main view. Yeah, this actually looks pretty good. And um, there are several advantages of using a point light over an infinite light. First is that the shadows are a bit different, so this is logical since point light shoots rays in a radial type of fashion. And more importantly, I have this light falloff, which will allow me to create some even more interesting shadowing, sorry. So light falloff is a feature that infinite light doesn't have, and it practically controls the distance up to which light is cast at a more intense value, and the distance after which light isn't cast anymore. So especially if you have more models in the scene, more lights in the scene, this is a really useful feature to have. Now, the first thing we notice, however, is that I get this shadow artifacts on my models, and they're really bothersome. They don't exist here in reality, so if I again am to render this out, you see they don't exist. They actually compute a very small shadow that exists on my model, and because they can't really calculate it properly, Photoshop to display things faster in my viewport, it just generates these lines to approximate that. And one way to fix it is to just raise my light upwards so so my model doesn't cast shadow onto itself anymore. So I've just to undo that. But I can fix this much easily. Just select my object and tell it not to catch shadows. So do not have other objects or my object itself cast shadow onto itself, but I'm keeping cast shadows on the ground floor. Okay, so by checking this, I'm fixing this really well. So I said I wanted to use the light falloff, and I will. And we notice that light falloff actually consists of two we could say area spheres that control the parameters I've told you about. Now they are of identical radius. So the outer sphere says after what amount of distance there is no light at all, and the inner sphere says where is the light more at 100%. So it is at 100% till this point, after which it fades out till this point, right? So if you want, we can zoom out. Sorry, we can zoom out a bit and preview them better, right? So now I want this to be a rather short gradient, and actually the reason I'm using falloff is because it affects my shadows, and this is really nice and gets a more lifelike feeling to the scene. So the fact that the shadow is finished here as so has some value to it visually for me. So just select my point light. I think I go a bit further with it, maybe 900, and reduce this maybe a bit. Now I'd like to have my shadows to be a bit more darker. So on my environment tab I have the ground plane controls, and here I can affect also the color of my shadow. which I can make it a light blue. Blue shadows occur. They're not actually blue, they're just the absence of light, right? This is what the shadow is. And under the normal daylight condition, you have blue light coming from the sky, so even though there's no sun, so that's why shadows tend to take a blue shade to it, and also ramp up the opacity of the shadow. So let me just render this out so I can preview this, let's say, a bit more accurately. So this looks pretty well. You see, I really love this gradient here. Okay, let me just cancel that. So I think we've covered this well. Great. So now that we've finished both our object placement, our camera placement, our lighting scheme, we should work on our shader. So I call it a shader. Photoshop calls it a material. It's actually a collection of textures that influence the properties of my object, of the way my object is rendered. So we can make our object look more like glass, more like rock, more like paper. So in my case, because like I said, I don't want to render this out every time. I will be using mostly the diffuse, obviously, and the specular parameter. I won't be touching reflections and roughness because these only show up properly when rendering. So if I amp up reflection, it will preview, but it won't preview roughness at all. And roughness is a fundamental parameter that is linked to reflection. So the preview can be useful, but you can't have so much control on it. So instead I'll use shine, which is pretty much a fake reflection if you want. So the shine is linked to the specular value. So the more white I have in my specular, the more light it will reflect. And we notice that this tends to bleach out my color information, whereas a pure black would actually leave me with really nice contrast. But I do want to have this reflection, and I can actually add color to it. So if this is something I want, I can also texture a texture on it if again this is something that's specific to my design. Say for instance, if I just happen to have a title that should be embossed and more glossy, I could texture that in. Now, to remove some of this bleach and still maintain these highlights, I can play with the shine parameter. So when the shine is close to zero, it mimics say paper or any rough surface that has micro porosity. So micro at a microscopic level, it isn't fine. It's coarse. So this tends to bounce light in all directions and just blur the lighting reflection out. And whereas something more like metal or plastic, which in our case is something that we want because it's magazine paper, it isn't regular paper. So something like this will have a more you notice the change in here. So a smaller radius of these reflections, as if the surface is fine. So let me just navigate around and take a feel of it. So you notice how the specular is a bit too strong from some angles, but from my angle is just fine. And to amp up my lighting in this area, there are two options I can take. One is to amp up this a bit, and I think I'll do this just to pop up my colors a bit more. And because my spotlight here has a falloff applied to it, so it doesn't light up the entire model strongly. And also, if I want to change my reflections, I can click and drag this, and this will rotate my environment map across the scene. So I'm looking for an angle that might be more interesting. So yeah, this could work, something like this. Great. So I like these reflections better. So I just go here and tell my shine to be a bit lower, right? So this should look really nice in the end. So it's still debatable if this area is too bright or not. I think it's okay. I could play with the environment a bit more. Let me see. So this is interesting as well, right? It gets me light on this side. Yeah, let's leave it like this. You can play with it whichever you feel like. You can go back and change the entire texture if you feel like this isn't working for you. So now we pretty much have everything covered and ready to move on to our next stage. What I'll wanna do first is double check everything on my model and also make sure um, everything works fine for my end goal. So again, I'll remember you that on our third part of this tutorial we'll be actually making an action that will load various JPEG or PNG files or whatever designs we have onto onto our texture canvas actually, right? So here, so that we will be overwriting this information with various images. Now one thing I noticed is that my pages don't show up on this on my lighting scheme right here, and this is probably because there's just too much light cast on it. So you notice that from some angles where, and it's also reflective in there. So this is a bit of a problem. So let me switch to my main view. A quick fix to this would be to map a specular texture. I think I'll just do that. This will also help show you. So let me just add this to the swatches and call it gray. I just remember which one is it. And so now I can go here and make this a new texture. Click OK and edit it. So what I'll do is fill up my background uh, with my gray. Let me go to Windows, swatches. So this is my gray. Let me just map that in. So I can actually do a cover overlay here. So I have more control. So I'll just pick this gray right here. So now I should be, this is what in effect my 3D specular looked like before. So it had this color spread on the entirety of my specular texture to be. And what I'll do is select these parts right here. So yeah, it's a pretty good selection. Let me check here. Maybe I should have been more patient and used the rulers, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference right now. And just make these I'll start with black and just make them 80% black. So this should reduce the specular on on my pages. So just save this, and let's see. Yeah, you notice how now I only have here a bit of a specular where there's more light, and now I can see my pages properly, right? I can't see them here, and this is a bit bothersome because I worked a bit on them. Also, I have a low resolution here, so it might be just because of this. But another thing I could do is go to my diffuse texture. Let me uncheck this and just let's see, these ones I'll just duplicate them and switch them to multiply, right? So now I should have more contrast here. So saving this, I should close this. Okay, so now it seems that it is a bit visible. I don't know if you can notice it, but it's definitely better. Great. So now I have two options to consider before moving onwards. So I can either leave it as it is and just make sure that in the end I will just amp up my image size, and can do that right now. So just double it maybe. So now I have a larger image size, and before exporting this I can do something like so let me duplicate this layer, rasterize this layer, right? So merge it with another and get like its pixel value, and just make it scale it down. So by scaling it down I achieve an anti-aliasing kind of operation. So um, because the 3D model is behaving like a vector file, it was no problem to scale it back up. But now that I have rasterized it and made it smaller, it should blur things out, and especially my edges, because you'll notice that when 3D when in 3D mode, right, um, you can't you don't get anti-aliasing with Photoshop when previewing in viewport, so you get all these jagged edges. And what I did by scaling my model down was um, actually in effect did mimic what an anti-aliasing filter does. So this is one option, and I think I'll use the scaling in my Photoshop action later on. And the other concern that I have regards my shadow. So I can either leave the shadow as it is, and it's pretty decent, or because I have several features at my disposal, such as this select pixels. I can select just my cover and have the shadowing and everything just pre-rendered. So let me just render this out for a moment, and I'll tell you again what I meant with what I was saying. So I can render this shadow out, and in the end just keep the shadowing and replace only the magazine, because the shadow will be identical regardless of whatever color information my magazine displays, right? So it really doesn't matter if I'm generating the shadow real time or not, because I won't be changing my camera angle, I won't be changing mm, I don't know, lighting parameters from one instance to another. So maybe this will make more sense once we go to the third part of our tutorial. So I think this is pretty decent because I plan on blurring this out a little bit. Okay, so let me just stop this. Actually, I leave it iterate one more time. Okay, so we have this. Let me just duplicate this so I can save it, and then I'll go here and just cut down the shadows, and I'll actually cut down all shadows from my scene. So now I can, when I control click it, I select just the pixels of my 3D object. So I can build a mask with this. I'll just save these pixels in a new layer. So this is one way to save masks. So I can hide this anytime. So now, because I've duplicated this file early on, I have my rendered file here, and I can merge this. So now it's just pixels. Okay, and I'll just mask it using this my mask below. So mask, and I'll just have to invert it. Bang. So what I did now is generated all my shadows just once, and I have all these ambient occlusion shadows here, which are pretty nice. Okay, and I can overlay them on top of my 3D model. Now obviously each time I will rotate my 3D model, these will be out of sync, right? They won't match up. So I don't have this versatility anymore. However, I've already decided that I will only be working from this main view right here. So it really doesn't matter that they don't sync up when I'm working on the file. They do sync up in the end. So this is working really great for me, and I will just blur these shadows out a bit, especially because you notice the geometry of my model in the shadows, unfortunately. So yeah, let's I will just use this selection and give it a small feather to it. So we go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and go for something small. Okay, and then I'll make another selection to target just these ends right here. So, and I give it this larger feather, maybe 20. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So it just blurs out as it distance away from the model. So great. So I notice I have this noise look here, which is contrasting a bit. So I'll just use the blur brush to just blur that out a little bit. Okay, great, great. So this actually looks really good to me, and I think we can call it a day and wrap this tutorial up. So thanks for watching. Please enjoy my third part of the tutorial, which you can check it out next.